Hey friends, Mike from Go Cell Phone Repair with the weekly Tech Talk Monday afternoon live stream. No long previews at the beginning this time. I know nobody really wants to have to skip through that stuff, so I wanted to jump right in. The thing is, it's really tricky to know exactly when you start, so I hate to get cut off or start talking too late or anything like that and just stare at the camera like what's going on. So anyways, I think I've got that fixed with just a brief intro there, so let's get this underway. So I'm just going to kind of recap here. I don't know why we jumped to that all of a sudden. Last week we were talking about a number of different topics, had a bunch of people on here Thursday night, so I might kind of briefly touch on those again because there was some really interesting things going on. I do also want to get my chat open here on the side real quick so that I can see when everyone gets in here. It's usually about 5 or 10 minutes before we really start to get a lot of traffic on the stream. So until then, I'm just going to go full screen with this thing, and wanted to briefly mention that we will not be doing a Monday afternoon live stream next week because of the holiday. So I hope everyone enjoys whatever it is that you happen to be celebrating this year, and do it in a safe manner, of course. And that might include taking some extra precautions with your cell phone, because if you haven't already heard, there are all sorts of reports coming out in California at least, where they're talking about the dangers of cell phones and keeping them close to your head and whether or not they're bad for kids and everything like that. So this is like not really that new. We've heard about it quite a few times in the past. You know, at least people have been very concerned about whether cell phone usage can lead to brain damage or brain tumors or anything like that. And sometimes it might seem like people who use their cell phones a lot do have some sort of processing issues, but I think it's more a distraction factor than it is anything else. But long story short, there was a report that came out back in 2007, I want to say it was, and that report was actually withheld. Like, it was supposed to come out to the public and it didn't. And a couple of years later, there was a person who actually sued in order to have that report released because he felt like this is something that the public needed to know about. And I kind of read through it. You know, I want to save you some reading if you don't have the time to do so. Otherwise, I'll put the links in the video description so you can see it for yourself. But what they pretty much said was that they suspected that cell phone radiation can be a problem, you know, when you have your phone sitting right next to your head or you have it under your pillow. And of course, the main concern is always for younger people because children's brains have not fully developed, so they're more susceptible to any kind of problems that you might have. And I would include pregnant women in that category because obviously if you have an unborn child that's being exposed to something, you always want to err on the side of safety because we really don't know what the long-term effects of things can be until we've got time to study them and come back and take a look at it. So what this report is kind of suggesting is that you don't use your cell phone, you don't have your cell phone sitting on your nightstand right next to your head, and that you don't carry it in your pocket where it's right up against your body. So I don't know how many other options that really leaves you. Unless, you know, I suppose if you are carrying some sort of bag with you, you know, whether it's a purse or a man bag or a backpack or a fanny pack or anything like that, maybe there's some special sort of insulation they put on those now, or that will probably be a gimmick that we see people selling. And in fact, it may be something that if you have a phone store, you might see people asking for, you know, what sort of protection do you have from the radiation of cell phones, and whether or not it's a legitimate concern. If it's something that customers are looking for, it's certainly something that should be considered, you know, at least to be made available for them. So there is that. And then there is the additional statement they made, which was, if you have children, you should not allow them to use a cell phone unless it's an emergency. And to that, I would have to say, good luck. I hope that I don't know. I think you would have a difficult time doing that if your children already are accustomed to using a phone. You know, how are you going to take that away from them? A smartphone. And not to mention that it does often end up kind of being something that parents will use to occupy their children. You know, it used to be set them in front of the TV. Now it's give them a phone and they get to play on it. And that's a whole different topic that we'll get into at some point in the future. But I think that's going to be a tricky one to pull off. And probably, at least for me, one of the deeper questions here is that even if we did find out, you know, let's say tomorrow we discovered conclusive evidence that says that cell phones do cause health problems, you know, that the radiation that's coming from your phone can give you a brain tumor. What percentage of the population, you know, what percentage of the world's population that is using a phone right now would be willing to give that up over safety concerns, because I think that that number would be a very low percentage. You know, when you think about everything that is, you know, kind of out there in the world right now, there are things that are easy to avoid, and then there are things that we use for keeping our lives convenient or simple, or to get entertainment from, or some other benefit that we see. And I always like to make this comparison to, you know, drugs and alcohol, nicotine, caffeine. If you think about fast food, junk food, you know, there's just so many different things out there that we know are bad for us, and people are going to continue to indulge in those behaviors. So it would be very difficult for me to see anyone giving up their phone or tablet because there's a possibility, you know, unless it was like 90% certainty you will get a tumor within the next few years, you know, and a lot of times people look at that as a long-term thing. You know, if it's not going to hurt me until, you know, when I'm 60, if you happen to be 20, then that's not a real, it's difficult to perceive that as a real concern until you start approaching that point in your life. So I'm very skeptical about, even if this does end up, you know, later on having someone come and say, hey, we've got it on paper, you know, we've proven this is a real thing. I'm really, really wondering, like, how many people will be able to give that up because they know that it's going to cause them some harm. And in fact, we see, you know, already some physical detriments from cell phone use, people who are having problems with their neck and their back and their eyes and everything else. And yet, you know, it's kind of like, this is what we have to do to survive. If you never drive your car on the freeway, you probably won't get in an accident, but that is obviously something that very few people are willing to give up in the world that we live in. And I think that smartphones and, you know, technology in general kind of fall into that category. Hi, Shashank, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Playlist, good to see you. Harvey, good to see you as well. Kids are addicted to cell phones and screens, and it's nuts, and I would agree 100%. Let's get this thing set up so that we can get the chat going. And I think if I do this, we will be there. Okay, we just have the big light bulb for some reason. So I almost had it. Just got to get rid of that and bring back the radiation. There it is. Okay, so let's see. Whoops. And if I keep shaking the table, that is why the camera is going crazy here. I am set up in a very awkward position at the moment. Kids are addicted to cell phones and screens. It's nuts. And what would you do about it? You know, if you had a kid and you knew for certain that cell phone use was going to cause them harm, what would you do? And why is my scroller all messed up now? It's going to be difficult, you know, to get rid of something like that. This is really annoying. I think that what's far worse than radiation is the bright light that is emitted. I've had my phones in my pocket, in my front pocket for years, and my DNA count has not been affected. Yeah, and if you didn't want to have kids, maybe it's not a bad idea to carry your cell phone in your pocket. But I would agree that the eye strain is a big concern, especially for me. You know, that's one thing that I am convinced. See if we can fix this up real quick. See, I almost had this all worked out. Every week it's something new. You know, one thing that I've definitely seen, and I would extend that beyond just using a cell phone, but also in phone repair, this has really started to be something that I've noticed a lot more within the last year and a half or so, and that is that my eyes are going bad, and people have said, and I can't, you know, say yes or no, but it certainly seems like as I've really gotten into doing, you know, more work on the bench, working with smaller parts, that my eyesight is getting worse. It could just be age, though. You know, that's another thing. It's always difficult to tell whether that's something, you know, that you got to factor in. And I was just listening to a very interesting podcast recently where a doctor was talking about how people would come in and have this hysteria about, oh, you know, they have this effect where people get sick in a building, and as soon as you hear about the symptoms, a lot of the other people that are in that same environment, wherever it happens to be, if it's an office place or, you know, in an airplane or whatever it is, and there's almost a contagiousness of symptoms when people find out that they exist. So there's that factor also. And what this doctor was pretty much saying is that a lot of times people get into his office and say, I must have this disease, you know, I must be experiencing symptoms because of this. And he's like, no, you know, it's probably because of your aging process. You know, these things start to happen. So who knows? But if we find out, Mohammed wants an iPhone 10. You know, I think I've got something on the iPhone 10 a little bit later on we'll talk about. But if anyone's giving them away, there's a volunteer that would like one. I'd like to have an iPhone 10. I would like to take it apart and mess with it. Don't forget to mention the social and mental health issue. People who spend more time online often have a much greater depression and lack of real world social skills. And playlist, I actually completed a collaboration video that I did with another channel. It's called Easy Computer Solutions, where we talked about a lot of, not only what you mentioned, but a lot of other things that are a detriment to young people who are using their phones more than they should. There's obviously a certain level of moderation that everyone should have when you're sitting there staring at a screen and not moving. And I couldn't agree more. When it comes to depression, weight gain, anxiety, even suicide attempts, all these things are a factor when you look at phone use and online usage in general when it comes to the internet, cyberbullying and all that kind of stuff. So a realistic concern for any parent out there, and I'm hoping to finish my other end of the collaboration so I can publish it here. But if you have time, go check it out. I'll add that link to the video description also. You need some eye drops and glasses after that filter out blue lights. I've heard about that too. There's supposed to be a special kind of glasses for that blue light filter, and I'm really thinking about that when I use the computer. But I think that what's causing me the most problems is like working with the small parts, which is when I don't have a monitor. And I've really tried to limit my screen time because I don't love staring at the computer for like hours at a time. But yeah, there's something about blue blocker or something like that. I'm definitely going to look into those. What's better for eyes? Hey Beha, what's going on? What's better for eyes, LCD or OLED? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. And I'm not sure if there's a difference, because I think if we're concerned about the radiation, my understanding is that there are currently no known no known problems associated with displays in general, just outside of the colors that are being emitted. But that's really a good question. There might be a difference there somewhere. And again, a lot of times when this information comes out, nobody wants to talk about it, or they want to suppress it because, if everyone found out that the iPhone 10 caused problems with your eyes, then that's going to hurt sales. So when it comes to the media in general, we should always keep in mind that they are to a certain extent influenced by their sponsors, and those sponsors are the people making these products. So I don't know the complete answer to that. Oh, thanks for the link, Harvey. Everyone check that out if you're interested in getting something that might, help save your eyes from screens. I'm going to look into that. LCD or OLED, I don't know. That's a good question, though. I certainly haven't noticed any difference in fatigue after one or the other. And, when we were a long, long time ago, parents used to say, don't let your kids sit so close to the TV. And when we were kids, we always thought that was funny. Like, what is sitting in front of the TV going to do to your eyes? And in fact, even CRT displays really are not supposed to have a problem with radiation, but apparently the early model TVs did. Like when they first made TVs and all the way up into, I want to say it was the early 70s, those televisions actually did have radiation problems that could cause damage to your eyes by sitting too close to the TV. But my understanding is that has been fixed like as of a long time ago, and we're probably not going to run into those anymore, hopefully. So I'll look into that. I'm gonna keep that question in mind, and when I get the answer, I will put it on the next live stream for sure. LED or OLED, I'm not really certain that it makes a difference at this point, but who knows? Let's see. We have another one. Guess what? Actually, I'm not going to jump off that topic because I keep forgetting about the lag here, guys, and I don't want to get ahead of anything. Do I think they'll be able to make different aftermarket ones for the iPhone 10? I believe that if and when LG starts supplying Apple, and there's actually another Chinese company, I can't think of the name right now, but they're talking about building another factory in China specifically for the purpose of manufacturing OLED. And the thinking is that maybe if that happens, then we'll have more sources, because as we all know, the problem with the OLED is there aren't too many places making them. And if you get something like a Samsung Galaxy OLED or AMOLED, one way or another, it came off of a Samsung phone, and that's always been the problem. And of course, with the iPhone 10, that's going to be the big issue. Probably the short answer or the best move, I think, at this point is still to either get into or seek out someone who's doing screen refurbishing in your area, so that you don't have to deal with sending in your broken screens and then waiting for them to come back in the mail. So there's a big opportunity for that also. If you're in the screen refurbishing business, you probably will get more people wanting to get screens fixed than you have time for. But in the long term, I certainly hope so. It sounds like that, and the thing is, if Apple is going to continue to make screens with OLED, and Samsung obviously is going to, and I want to say that there are a couple other companies that are considering adding, using that for their displays. There's got to be some third parties that build out whatever it is they need to start manufacturing that stuff for aftermarket. So I would certainly hope so. I think so. If you ask me, do I think so? Yes. I think that's going to happen. It's really just a question of when. I see people come into the shop all the time with little radiation blocker stickers attached to the rear of their phone. The phone has got service. It's not blocking anything, buddy. Yeah, this is the funny thing. I should have grabbed some of those. We've had those in the store since, I want to say, mid-2000s. And when I saw them, my reaction was the same. I'm like, how is this little sticker going to protect you? And if it did, why wouldn't you just put that into every phone in the factory, right? But if someone's looking for that product and you don't have it on your shelf, you have two choices. You can either find a supplier to sell them what they're asking for, or you can explain to them that what they want to purchase is not worth the money that they're investing in it. I mean, that's really a choice that you have to make. And obviously, you're going to have a difficult time talking people out of buying things in many cases. And if you do, you're not going to make that sale. So it's really a question of how far you want to go to educate your customer and to what cost. So, if you want to buy a $5 sticker because it makes you feel better, and we actually had little cell phone boosters that people swore by. You could stick these inside of the battery when you could take the back panel off the phone. And people would ask me, do these things work? And I would tell them, I haven't seen a noticeable difference. I've had people that say that they do, people that say that they don't. And we've had people that bought these little stickers, put them on their phone, come back a week later, and they'll swear they're the greatest thing in the world, and they gain an extra bar and their reception's better. So I assume that there's a certain level of not self-fulfilling prophecy, but just kind of perceived value based on what they think is happening. But how would that work? That's a good question. Or it just doesn't make sense, really, if you think about it. Have you ever gotten debris in your eye during repair from a dirty phone? I've gotten things in my eye, not from a dirty phone, I don't think. We had an employee that got a piece of glass in his eye, which is like the worst thing I can possibly think of. I've come close, but so far, no. And you can ask Beha, he's seen me before. I have my safety glasses on when I'm prying anything. When there's any possibility of a battery exploding, which is pretty much any phone. Anytime I'm working on the inside of the phone, I will almost always have my silly looking safety glasses on, and I'll forget to take them off, and I'll go talk to customers, and it probably looks like I came from a rave or something. But I'm very careful about protecting my eyes. I mean, you only got two of them, and to buy a $2 pair of safety glasses at a hardware store to wear those to protect yourself, I think is well worthwhile. I even know guys that wear a face mask because even with the goggles, you can have stuff go underneath there. But so far, so good, Harvey. I've gotten other things, but it hasn't been from working on phones. We'll be interested in phone which has a Kindle E-Link like display just for saving my eyes. Hey, what do you all think about Kindles and Amazon in general not supporting YouTube or not being able to play YouTube videos after the end of the year? I don't know if you already heard about this, and I kind of meant to make something up about it. I totally forgot. In fact, let's go back to this so we don't sound like we're talking about something completely different. So if you don't already know about this, this is really interesting. Google and Amazon have kind of been at it for a little while, and what happened, apparently, is when Kindle launched their Fire Stick, they decided that they did not want to have the Google Chromecast dongle on their website. So you cannot buy Chromecast from Amazon because they saw that as a competing device, and they really wanted to push their Fire Stick instead. So just recently, Google said, well, if you're not going to sell our products on your website, then we are not going to support your devices with our application. So there won't be, apparently you won't have the ability to use the YouTube app on any Amazon products or any Amazon Kindle, Fire Stick, or anything like that after the first of the year. Have you guys heard about that? Because it is going to be interesting to see what happens. Does Kindle start killing more products that are associated with Google, and does Google come up with another way to, I think there's some sort of law that prevents them from keeping Amazon out of search results on Google, but, a lot of times things go on behind the scenes that we don't know about. So I'm really interested to see how that one's going to work out. And I have a Kindle. It's not much of a tablet really, but it works. And I'm wondering if there's any way to prevent that from changing. I think we kind of did briefly go over this a couple weeks ago. But I would imagine that there are going to be a lot of people who want to start rooting or getting root on their Kindle devices or Fire Sticks or whatever, so that they'll be able to play YouTube and, anything else that Amazon decides to block, which is unfortunate because, again, because of this competition or whatever you want to call it that's going on, it's not either company probably that's going to see the short-term effects. It's going to be the customers. You have a Kindle, you spent this money, or whatever Fire Stick, you spent money on it, and all of a sudden you can't play YouTube. Or, vice versa. You go to Amazon and, I can't find the product that I want to buy because they don't want to carry Google stuff. And it's like, why are we having this contest? It's kind of silly if you ask me. But I actually have 2 Kindle tablets that might be going for sale or something, because that's just kind of silly. Let's see, will they be interested? Let's go to this because I'm sure you're all interested and already knew. And I'm only going to go over this briefly, but the FCC has ignored, obviously, all the information, all of the arguments, all the petitions, all of the publicity, everything that people said that they wanted as far as keeping net neutrality, and they pretty much said, no, we're going to change it anyway. So it looks like many states are already beginning to draw up legislation, California included. In fact, the Senate is going to put this thing to the vote, so the fight is definitely not over yet. So if anyone thought, okay, net neutrality is dead, that's not the case. There's still time to make things happen. That's why I still have the little sticker down there if you go to battlefromthenet.com. I won't dwell on this. I know I always bring it up, but to me this is very important because what I do for a living depends on people being able to access my information. And when an organization, even if it's a government organization, steps in and says, hey, we're going to allow someone to limit access to what it is that you provide, I take that very personally. Not to mention that I do believe in freedom of speech, and it's just insane to see that things are changing, that the climate is changing so drastically, and that something like the Constitution continues to be attacked by, people who have lots of money to change legislation and control legislatures and control government organizations, and it's just insanity. So there's still a chance. There are still many people who are higher up than we are who are willing to fight this thing and keep it, keep them from repealing it and taking it away from us. So hopefully that will change. So I won't spend too much time on that, but I wanted to let everyone know. Again, I'll have a link in the video description. So if you're interested and you want to help out, be sure to contact them. And also what they do is they have a shortcut that tells you what your senator and what your representatives are doing, what their stance is. Are they pro-cable or are they pro-freedom of speech? And it's very easy to find out who's who. So, when it comes voting time or it comes time to contact them, you can tell them exactly how you feel. Excuse me. Always safety first. One time, 2 seconds after putting on my safety glass, I had a small piece of glass hit the glasses. Yeah, man, I can't, it's so difficult for me when I'm training to really get that point across. You only have 2 eyes, some people only have 1. And for anyone who can't see, they've got to be thinking, if you're not protecting your vision, you are insane. So, and it's very easy to forget, unfortunately, if you're not in the habit of it. But that's one of the things that I go over, over and over and over during training. I let people know when they come in that if you're doing training at our facility, there's a certain amount of liability that I need to prevent, and part of that is you getting hurt. So not having safety glasses on in those situations is very important. So I'm glad you're keeping at it, Beha, and passing on the good word, because I really hate to hear when people get injured, and when it comes to your eyes, man, a lot of things can't heal. Do you ever consider buying standard iPhone screens instead of aftermarket because it's only a few dollars more? Yeah, John, we actually, if you're talking about for my personal use, there's actually quite a bit of difference in the price, but when it comes to customers, we carry both. We have people that come in and say, I want the original, I won't settle for anything less. And then when we show them the price for the OEM versus the aftermarket, sometimes they say okay, and a lot of times they say, oh, well, I'll go ahead and try that other one instead. And this is a funny phenomenon that I just see over and over and over. I worked in an office supply store for a while, and we had regular paper and recycled paper. And this is when the green movement was getting very popular. Everyone is into going green, let's recycle, let's save the planet. And we'd have people come in and say, yeah, I need to buy a case of paper. It's like a big box. It has, 10, 12 reams in it or whatever. And they'd say, I want the recycled paper. I want to do the right thing. Give me the green, special paper. And I'd take them over to that paper, and they'd look at it and they'd see the price. And it was $2 more per case than the regular paper. And that was enough of a price difference for them to say, forget about saving the planet, give me the cheaper one, which just kind of blew my mind. You know, really, it's all good in practice. You know, it sounds good when you say, oh, I want to do the right thing, but then when there's a price tag attached to it, that's when people really make those decisions. So we carry both options for customers, because we definitely have people who want to have OEM only. That's all they'll settle for, and that's fine. Personally, I've had an aftermarket on my iPhone for about a month and a half, 2 months now. And, you know, maybe if I put my reading glasses on, I might see a difference, but I'm okay with the aftermarkets personally. California and New York will sue the administration for the repeal of Title II. Yeah, there's California, New York. I want to say there was 1 or 2 other states in there. I may be wrong on that, but I think that hopefully more states will join this fight. And, you know, if there are enough people out there, there's enough awareness brought to this, which was like just the real big lacking thing here. You know, it's like with SOPA and everything else. It's just like you don't see anyone talking about it. You know, it's just a very small percentage of us who are paying attention to what's going on behind the scenes. And then when they pass something like that, it takes a while. You know, they kind of play the good guys, I think, initially, and then they just slowly change things a little bit at a time. And before you know, it's just like, okay, I can get used to that. I can get used to that. But, you know, we really have to stand up and just stop this before it happens. California, oh, sorry, I repeated myself. Wear a face shield whenever I take apart a device. Dust equals human skin. Yeah, you can never be too careful, that's for sure. The difference on the OEM and the aftermarket, John, to give you an example, like an iPhone 7, which is one that we do quite a bit, the aftermarket, the OEMs, I want to say the cost on just the display, not to install it, but for us to buy the OEM iPhone 7s, I want to say they're around $70 right now, and we can get a Tianma aftermarket, which is what I referred to earlier that I'm using now. $20 is the cost. So, you know, you're looking at least a $50 difference to go from a pretty decent aftermarket that looks good to an OEM, LCD that came off of an original iPhone 7. So it's kind of that seems like a lot, you know, when you present it to a customer. Tech Couple, what's going on? Hey, you guys, I have been trying to get a hold of you for a while. Everyone, the Tech Couple, I did a collab. We actually did a Google Hangout a while ago with the Easy Computer Solutions I mentioned earlier. I'm gonna get you guys on. I know you have a thing going Thursday night, so maybe we can do this on Monday. I think I've got this worked out to where I can bring a camera into my software, because the Google Hangout stuff to me is very limited, you know, as far as what we can do. But Corey, hit me up, shoot me an email, and let me know what your availability is. I want to get you on here. You know, if you can't do a Thursday night, we'll figure something out. Maybe we'll do a Monday or whatever works. But I want to make that happen. Thanks for coming by, though. Really appreciate it. It's good to see you out there. So, yeah, FCC radiation. Check this out. Here's the next one. Apple has apparently secured a patent. This is my understanding. And I don't know why you would need to do that, but they want to build in a whisper function for Siri. So, you know, I thought about this before, and I was going, you know, I swear I've whispered stuff to Siri before and she can hear it. So I picked up my phone and I started whispering to Siri, and sure enough, she can make out what I'm saying. Well, apparently what this patent is designed to do is allow or enable or somehow Siri will be able to whisper back to you. So if you're in a situation where people, you know, you don't want to be heard, but you also don't want them to hear Siri talking back to you, I guess instead of turning down the volume, they're going to build in some sort of whisper voice for privacy. I don't know. It's a weird thing that they would have to get a patent to make something like that, but my suspicion would be that they'll do so in order to prevent anyone else from doing it first. So they kind of own the rights to do that first, which I don't know if it's anything really to get excited about, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Do you only have high and low quality, or do you have a high, medium, and low quality? No, you know, John, we go with the OEM and what I would say is I would call it a good quality, low cost. There are cheaper screens, but these are the ones that are as low as you can go in price and still have a very low defect rate and have them be very difficult to tell from the original. The main difference that most people notice on these screens is going to be the brightness, and occasionally if you set them next to each other, you'll notice just kind of a slight bluish or greenish tinge to the screen. You know, it's really imperceptible for the most part when you just look at the phone, but when you set them side by side, you can definitely tell there's a difference in color. And another interesting thing is that Apple, or not Apple, but aftermarket screen suppliers will manufacture different types of LCDs for different regions. So we have companies that make screens that are designed for the European market, screens that are designed for the Asian market, screens that are designed for the US market, and they all have color variations based on where they're made to be sold, which I don't know why. I would assume it has something to do probably with either the type of light sources or what the weather is typically like in those regions. I don't really know the answer, but for whatever purposes, they've decided to design different types of screens for different parts of the world, and we see those come through. Sometimes it's like, oh, you know, this one doesn't look exactly like the other one. And when we started contacting people and asking about that, they said, oh, you probably got one of the LCDs that was manufactured for the Asian market because they have a slightly different color set up on the screen. Weirdest thing, yeah. And on top of that, it appears that the big challenge with the aftermarket screens is to have as bright of a backlight system. So a lot of times you'll notice that the screen isn't quite as bright. You have to turn it up a little more. And my suspicion is that, you know, obviously it's just a couple of LEDs that are, you know, across, well, not a couple, but a few LEDs that go across the top of the screen. And I think what happens is that they probably don't have as efficient a system as Apple does for lighting up the back screen. And for that reason, instead of putting on a screen that's going to kill your battery much faster, I think they've kind of toned down the brightness just to kind of compensate that, which is another topic I'm going to get to here in just a second about Apple. But yeah, that's what we carry. We carry a low cost, I would say good quality. It's very reliable. It's not going to be exactly the same as the OEM. And then we carry the OEM, but we don't want to kind of get into a whole lot of different choices. And this is just a general tip that I usually give people when we're talking about sales. You know, one thing that we've noticed consistently with phones and with accessories and with screen options and with everything in the store is that people do like to have choices, but they don't like to have too many choices, or it becomes overwhelming. And when you're trying to make a decision, it makes you less likely to, you know, come to a conclusion if you have many choices than if you just had one or two. And I know that sounds crazy because obviously we want to have as many choices as possible. But when it comes to the selling process, if you say, hey, we've got this case in black and white, or, you know, maybe you have clear also, and then you say, well, we've also got pink, and that's the other one that I recommend. That's kind of the exception to the rule. I always tell people, if you're selling accessories, you should have black, white. You may want to have clear, but you have to have pink because there is a certain number of people in, you know, in the country, in the world probably, that if something is made in pink, that's what they're going to choose every time. And if you don't have it, they'll go look for it. But outside of that, if you start adding, you know, oh, we got red and we've got green, we've got purple, we've got yellow, it becomes increasingly difficult for the customer to make a decision. And we see the same thing in restaurants. You know, if you go to, and one of the reasons that these companies work so well, take a look at In-N-Out Burger. You know, if you go look at their menu, it's, do you want this, this, or this? It's very simple. That drive-through line is packed 24/7. They figured out how to make it work, and that's where people go. Now, if you take a look at something like, you know, a lot of Chinese restaurants. If you go to a Chinese restaurant, there's one locally in town that we love to go to, but I got to tell you, the first time I went there, Cheesecake Factory is another one. They have a book. You know, it will literally take you 30 minutes to go through the entire menu, and for that reason, what you're doing is sitting in that establishment, taking up space, preventing other customers from coming in. You see what I'm getting at here? So they're not making any money when you're trying to, oh, do I want this? Do I want this? Let me bookmark this page and come back and decide later if I want to buy, oh, and then they have this dish over here. If they had 5 things to choose from, that process would go by like that. But when you start offering all those different options, not only does it become more time consuming, but it often becomes confusing to the customer because they might think, okay, I understand what this option is. Wait a minute, I forgot. Tell me about this one again, and that kind of drags out the process. And for that reason, we find that having a couple of choices works really well. So we try to give the best 2 options, you know, within reason for the most part. Let's see. Best rule for safety: if you let your mom or sister do the same task the same way, it's too risky and should take more precautions. Or if you find yourself doing the safety squint, yeah, I agree. That's a good rule of thumb for a lot of things. You know, if you would, again, I will outside of net neutrality, I will stay away from politics for the most part. But with everything that's going on in the news, with sexual harassment stuff, I kind of have the same attitude towards that. You know, it's a great example when it comes to safety, when it comes to how people are treated, you know, how people are treated in the workplace, how people are treated out in the real world. You know, would you want a family member? You know, would you want your mother, your sister, your daughter, would you want them being treated a certain way? And if not, then obviously that is not the way that you should be treating people, right? So I like that. That's a good analogy. And same, like you said, yeah, for safety, you know, if you're going to have your mom do the repair, you'd want to make sure she's safe. Why shouldn't you be safe too? Some people like to live dangerously. I'm not one of them when it comes to getting glass in my eyes or, you know, anything like that. So for sure. All right, so we had the Whisper thing, and I think, if I didn't mess up here, oh, I just got this. I had to throw this on there because I love it so much. They have, I'm going to figure out how we can trigger this in the future, but I can hit a button now and give old Pi, whoops, not that one, this one. Give Pi a pie. Isn't that great? Okay, so the next one was going to be Apple's alleged throttling of older iPhones with degraded batteries. Have you heard about this? You probably noticed it if you haven't already heard people talking about it. So there's an app in the App Store, and I will have to pull up the page to see, but if you go to Mac Rumors and just type in Apple throttling, what happened is a lot of people were kind of noticing that their older phones were having problems just going slower. And this wasn't after an upgrade. It wasn't after they used up a bunch of storage. It wasn't after they put any new applications on there. It was just over time their phones started running slower and slower, and it doesn't make sense, right? And we've always kind of assumed that the new iOS, every time a new iOS launches, phones that are a couple generations old. Sorry, my dog's freaking out. You okay? The prior generations cannot really handle the newest version of iOS. And for that reason, they'll kind of slow down a little bit. And it kind of bugs me that Apple will allow those devices to upgrade, because I know that, you know, it's almost as if they want you to upgrade, see your phone's running slower, and then want to buy a new one. You know, if it can't handle it, don't let them do the upgrade, or at least turn off the nag screen so it doesn't keep bugging you. Well, you know, some people started paying some very close attention to this, and a developer came up with an app that will test your iPhone or your iDevice for benchmark processing speed, single and multiple cores. So what you can do is download this app, run it, and see if and apparently the iPhone 6 had a big problem with this. You remember there was a battery issue, and they had to recall some of the iPhones, and they were replacing the batteries for customers. And then when they released, I think it was 10.2.1, that kind of fixed a lot of the problems that people were having with their batteries. Well, apparently it wasn't necessarily, you know, according to what this app has shown, it wasn't necessarily because the batteries were, or excuse me, because the phones were so old, or because of the software update. It was actually because as the battery starts to get older and can't last as long, allegedly, Apple is instructing somehow, you know, telling these older devices to run slower in order to preserve battery power. And so these guys went in and took some phones and started testing them, and noticed that yes, if the battery's old and it's ready to get changed out, the phone will actually start running slower. So if you suspect that that's a problem, now here's the catch. There's an app you can download to figure out if your phone is performing at benchmark speeds. It is $1.99. You have to pay for it, but after the last update they did on the app, it is now only available in Chinese. So unless you can read that, you're going to have a difficult time interpreting to the results. So as soon as I find that, actually, let me see if I can pull it up here real quick. I think I still have it in my browser. Give me one moment here. It's called, I gotta get my drum roll. It is called CPU Dasher X. So if you're interested in this, you can get that app, and it will basically tell you if your battery is getting old and you need to change it. But you know, you can get something like Coconut Battery and a number of other apps that will test your battery and tell you where it's at. But if you suspect that your phone is running slow and it's an older generation iPhone, it may be because the battery needs to be changed out, which, you know, if you're not a tech, is not an easy thing to do. So interesting way to extend the battery life. But at the same time, it's like if the phone's running slower, then you need to have it on longer to complete whatever task it is you're doing. So I suppose somehow this optimizes your CPU, but it sounds kind of goofy to me. And at the same time, it does explain a lot. as far as why our phones are running slower or do run slow on occasion. All right, let's see if I did this correctly. Yes, I did. Okay, so there's a phone that supposedly can do what the iPhone 10 can't do, and it's going to be our nightmare phone if it catches on, which it probably won't because it's a smaller brand name. Easy solution, jailbreak and use speed intensifier. I'm still using my iPhone 4 and it's running like new. Hey, that's cool. I'm going to look that up, Harvey. I've got a few older iPhones running, sitting around here. It would be cool to kind of test them. Actually, you gave me a great idea. That'd be good for that would be good for a video. Of course, the catch is jailbreak, which is a terrible name for gaining that level of access to your phone, because when people hear jailbreak, they always feel like they're committing a crime. I wish they would have called it something different, because it kind of gives it a bad reputation when it really shouldn't have one for the most part. So there is a phone out there that is going to be able to read your fingerprint through the touch screen, like the whole touch screen. Remember how they were saying, oh no, when the new iPhone 10 comes out, it's not going to have touchscreen in the home button. It's going to be built into the screen, and therefore when you break your screen, you're out of business. And if that never happened and we breathed a sigh of relief, well, supposedly there's another company that is going to do just that. And am I going to go blank on the name? Give me 1 second. I actually have the link here. Let me pull that one up, because I think this is not really something to worry about. I don't think that Apple is going to ever go ahead with that, because they're so satisfied with their darn it, I clicked the wrong thing, because they like the Face ID stuff so much. But here's the interesting thing. This method is actually faster than Face ID. So you can unlock your phone a lot quicker by just touching the screen with your fingerprint. And let's see if we can find it here. Where do we go? Okay, here we go. This is on Tom's Guide. Obviously, you can see the... Can we just go there directly? Can I right click and go there? Nope. You know, of all the things computers can do, I can think of a few more that would improve them. All right, so this is from a company, I want to say called Novo, but I want to say it wrong. Vivo, sorry. It's a company called Vivo, and they're working with Synaptics. They were originally going to do this with Qualcomm, but apparently something went weird on the deal. And again, you know, since no one's heard of this phone, I don't think it's anything that we need to be too concerned about if that's the only thing that they have going for it, because coming up against any big brand name is going to be a difficult thing to do. I think it is interesting at the same time, though, that someone is building this feature in, which would lead me to believe that maybe they did secure a patent on this a long time ago. I don't think that would have affected Apple's plans as far as having Face ID, because again, you know, all the functionality that you get from Face ID when it comes to apps and emojis, and, you know, not to mention their security aspect of that, I don't think would have ever got them to go back to a Touch ID. But in the future, you know, maybe they will come up with both of the above. The rumor is that with the Galaxy S9, they are going to keep the fingerprint scanner on the back of the phone, which I think is great news. I always felt like it would be easier just to put the whole home button on the back of the phone. I wish that everyone would kind of follow LG's lead on that. It's just such a natural place to have your finger, you know, on the back instead of reaching down to the bottom. But it doesn't look like Apple will be doing this. This phone can, but I wonder if that's going to be their only selling point. And if it is, think about when a customer comes in and they broke their screen and you have to tell them, sorry, but, you know, if that's where the security is built in, which hopefully that's not the way that they did it, but if they have something that's the equivalent of a secure enclave built into the display itself, it's going to be difficult to service that customer, you know, because we won't be able to, I would assume, won't be able to match those two up. But at the same time, I'm hoping that most manufacturers will keep in mind that they don't have a store on every corner. You know, even Apple, as big as they are, can be not easily accessible by a lot of their customers. So for anyone to join into this program where we only want you to bring your phone to us for service, I think we're still a long ways off before that happens. And I would be really shocked for that to change anytime soon. And, you know, even with Apple, you know, you can't just open up a store every 10 miles. I mean, there's a lot of money that goes into that stuff. So I'm not panicking yet. There are a lot of other things they could do probably to make our lives more difficult, and they haven't. So good news for us in the repair business. Now, here's an interesting one. There's a woman in China who had her phone unlocked, her iPhone 10 Face ID unlocked by her neighbor. Now, I know there's all kinds of, even the article itself sounded pretty bad, so I don't want to, let's not go the obvious route there. But when Apple designed Face IDs, they probably did not take into consideration the differences that people have in their appearances throughout the world, or if they did, they weren't concentrating in certain markets where apparently this is a problem. So if they weren't looking for the subtle differences of a certain type of feature, then Face ID is pretty much defeated. So this lady let her neighbor grab her phone. They're not related. They're not sisters. They're not twins, anything like that, which we already know there's kind of an issue with kids and their parents and twin siblings. But this lady had her friend try out her phone, and her face unlocked the Face ID. So she took the phone back to Apple and said, hey, this is not secure. You know, my neighbor can look at it and it unlocks. And they said, oh, okay, you know, it's a 1 in a million chance. And apparently they replaced her phone and it did the same thing. So I guess she ended up getting a refund out of this. And I'm curious to find out, you know, and this could obviously go much further than this one incident here. There could be many places in the world where the facial features that Face ID recognizes might not be different enough for the phone, or, you know, maybe it takes a while for you to own your phone for it to really get used to your the way that you look in different situations, and then kind of like build a solid method for recognizing you. But at the same time, we know that the way that Face ID works, it allows for different variations because of different expressions that we're going to make at different times. You know, if you can imagine, if you were in danger, your facial expression would be a lot different than if you just woke up, you know, or if you're in the middle of a party or something. So they've got to have a little, you know, some margin for error in there in order for the functionality to work. And apparently in some cases, this is going to be a problem. You've seen the headline, it says, wait, is the iPhone 10 racist? Which is obviously a ridiculous thing to say, because can we just be adults here and say that different people have different facial structures based on where they live, or, you know, based on their origin? Big deal. That doesn't make anyone racist. It's such a weird thing, but apparently this can be an issue for some people. So I'm really curious to see how this turns out, because I have a feeling that a lot of people are going to start comparing their you know, their friends and their family, and hey, can you unlock this? It'll probably be the next big bar game that people are gonna play, is I'll buy you a drink if you can unlock my iPhone with your face, or something along those lines. But really not good news for Apple, I don't think. I'm curious to hear what their statement will be, you know, in reaction to this thing here. I wanted to bring this up. I know this is not directly related to phone repair. It's not directly related to phones in general, but, you know, technology is technology, and I've just kind of not been paying attention to this thing for a long time, which apparently was a mistake. And I'm curious to know if any of you, just, you know, for general casual conversation, have any take on this whole Bitcoin deal. Her neighbor could be her long lost twin sister. That's true. That's a good point there. I'm curious to know what any of you have in the way of information, advice, questions, curiosities about Bitcoin. I was at an event a couple nights ago, and the conversation was all about Bitcoin, because as you probably noticed, they went from, you know, next to nothing to, at one point it was almost $20,000 per coin. My understanding of it is very limited, so I don't want to come on here and start talking about it as if I understand it fully. So by no means quote me, do not quote me, and do not take my advice. I'm not a financial advisor, but I finally broke down and bought some Bitcoin because, you know, with a small amount of risk and a potential for a big payoff, it sounds like when you really break it down, the value of Bitcoin varies depending on people's belief that it is a real monetary system that will work and continue to work. So basically, the faith of the people who are investing in Bitcoin and using Bitcoin is really what affects its worth. And when you break it down, you know, in the simplest of all terms, it's very simple to the way, it's very similar to the way that currency works. If people don't have any confidence in a particular market, whether it's the U.S. or, you know, China or euros, or, you know, anywhere else in the world, when that confidence falls, it hurts their monetary value. And, you know, with virtual currency, it looks like that's the same thing. You know, as long as no one steps in and makes it, you know, makes it illegal, which, you know, would, I mean, obviously it will be taxed if you earn money on it. But barring them saying you can't own Bitcoin if you live in the U.S., because being a worldwide currency, you can't tell the whole world not to use it. I think that, you know, if and when it does, they feel that they have control over it. And currently the IRS looks at Bitcoin as property and not as money. So it's treated differently in many respects. And, you know, for a brief history, this stuff came out and was used initially for a lot of things that were in fact against the law. You know, people were buying things off of Silk Road and having drugs sent to them and hiring hitmen and, you know, every terrible thing that you can possibly imagine. But now that it's become more mainstream and more accepted, you know, there are a lot of small vendors that will accept Bitcoin in exchange for goods and services. And in fact, a lot of phone repair shops who are now accepting Bitcoin. And I'm curious to know, like, how many of you are getting involved in this? How many of you are using it? And if anyone is actually accepting this at your store. We've had people come in and ask if they can buy Bitcoin, you know, if we can kind of act as a broker. And, you know, obviously that involves building out a method to make that happen. We've got vendors. I've got email in my email box right now where vendors are trying to sell mining equipment in order for you to mine your own Bitcoins, which, you know, is a whole nother thing altogether. And my understanding is the way that it works is that computers have to solve these very difficult mathematical problems in order to complete part of this blockchain. And long story short is if someone else solves that problem first, then you are not going to earn any Bitcoin. So there's this constant thing that is increasingly difficult and actually consumes more electricity as time goes by, because these problems become more and more complex and they require more computer power, more computing power to solve these problems, to the extent that it's actually affecting the coal market in China, because they're having to produce more coal in order to fuel all these machines that are mining coin. It's just mind-blowing. Like, and again, this is my very simple take on this. I definitely don't understand, you know, A to Z how it works. I kind of got an idea on it, and the other night we all just kind of said, you know what, we need to at least get some of this. You know, even if you risk a small amount of money and you lose it, big deal. But if you don't buy into this, if you take a look at the numbers, in 2009, when Bitcoin was first created, if you had invested $100 at that time, you want to know how much it will be worth right now? My head was going to explode. And it has made more millionaires, I think, in the last 10 years than probably anything else. $100 investment in Bitcoin in 2009 now is the equivalent of $28 million. So $100, if someone happened to have laying around in this Bitcoin account, which at the time they were probably using for purposes that they shouldn't have been, would now have a value equal to $28 million. And they've got applications where you can buy. It's like it's like setting up a PayPal account. You can go in, buy, sell anytime you want. There's a transaction fee. You can use your credit card, which blew my mind. You can buy Bitcoin on your credit card. You can link your bank account if you feel confident about that. And then of course you want to get a Bitcoin wallet so that you can make sure that your coins are secure, because there is a hacking element. There are ways for people to steal it, and there's just all this other stuff goes into it. But I had to bring this up because it is dominating the news. I've been watching it for the last few days and kicking myself for not buying into it like at least a week ago, because it went crazy for a while and now it's kind of leveling off, and it's definitely going to be a roller coaster ride. But Harvey bought 14 bucks worth a couple weeks ago. Now it's worth 70. I mean, obviously you don't make that kind of money with stocks or bonds or anything else in that short, you know, maybe day trading or something like that. But congratulations, man. That's awesome. I'm assuming you're holding them. Now, if you believe in Bitcoin, the advice that I got from one investment expert was that you should hold, and if they dip, you should buy more. So they expect it to keep going up, and if you talk to someone else, they say it's a big bubble that's going to burst at some point, and then somebody's going to get stuck losing a bunch of money. But I feel like if you invest a small amount, and, you know, I suspect that a lot of people are looking at this going, hey, I need to get in on this too, which is exactly what I felt. And as long as that continues to happen, the values can only go up. And if a lot of people start accepting Bitcoin as a virtual currency for services and goods and things like that, then it's going to be difficult for this to go downhill, you know, unless some federal agency steps in and kind of shuts it down within the US. But again, the way that it works, because it's a virtual currency that's not really tracked the same way that your bank account is, I'm curious to know, like, if that's even a possibility, or if they're just going to say, okay, we just want our cut. You know, the IRS sees profit being made. It's not long before they're going to come in and say, hey, we're going to tax this in one way or another. So I would expect that to be a more realistic outcome. There's a video from 2 years ago on YouTube that has a guy showing how to buy pizza with Bitcoin. The pizza cost him 18 coins. Wow. So basically about $400,000 almost for a pizza. Jeez. Andrew McKenzie, how's it going? Good afternoon. That is nuts. I mean, I'm just like, and now you can buy fractions of coin. This is the craziest thing about it of all, is that there's no minimum investment. You know, if you want to get into the stock market, you can do day trading and pay a lot of fees, but the stock market in the US, the way I understand it, is set up so that if you don't have at least $50,000 fluid, that you really can't do. There are restrictions to what you can do, and they've kind of written this into law so that the larger investors don't have to worry about anyone with a small amount of money coming in and affecting the market, which again, you know, that's kind of the world we live in. But with Bitcoin, it's all different. It's kind of open to anyone. I mean, you can buy it for any amount that you can justify a transaction fee, which I think the minimum transaction fee is 15 cents. And it's like 1.5% on a bank account and 3.99% or 3.9%, I believe, if you use a credit card. So it's not a huge amount, but you definitely, if you had a bank account set up specifically for that, or you feel confident that you don't mind giving them your banking credentials. These are big companies that back this stuff, so they appear to be completely legitimate. The way I understand it, at least the one that I'm using, which was Coinbase. But they do recommend that if you buy Bitcoin, that you don't keep it in Coinbase, that you should have a Bitcoin wallet that's secure, and they have several recommendations as to where you should move your money to, but you don't want to leave it in the same medium where you purchase and sell your Bitcoin from. That's what I've been told, if it's worth anything. I suspect the market for Bitcoin will continue to rise as long as the value of the US dollar continues to decline. Thank you, Donald Trump. Yeah, this is a very interesting thing also, is that when people look at the economy, and you know, we have seen some growth, but a lot of it is based on things that happened before Trump came into office. So, you know, obviously I don't want to start speculating too much, but I think you bring up a good point, and that is the less faith that people have in the system that exists now, which a lot of people have very little reason to believe in the system, especially after the last recession and after, you know, a number of things have happened. I'm going to tell you my sad stories, but yeah, I think the less that people believe in the systems that are in place, and that they see that banks are getting bailouts and, you know, adding on fees for customers for just ridiculous things, and it's kind of like, okay, you guys are running the whole game and controlling everything. Now there's an alternative. Now I can take my money and put it somewhere else, and I can do business and buy and sell things with this other currency that is not affected the way that the stock market is. You know, it's not, it's obviously it's not immune. But my understanding is that, you know, the main factor for Bitcoin value is on how many people are buying it and how many people are using it. So even if a particular market collapses, it shouldn't have the type of impact on Bitcoin value that just the general, I want to say faith, but that's not really the correct term for it, but the belief that people have that it is that it's a real thing, and that it works, and that it will continue to hold value, which, you know, I'm hoping that it does. I mean, that's what I'm betting on. We'll see. But it will be interesting in the short term, or in the long term and the short term. I mean, the way this stuff goes, it's really like a roller coaster. You look at the reports, and it's just up and down. I mean, the one I have on the screen obviously shows the growth over, I think it's the entire year, but for the weekend, it's been all over the place. So definitely interesting. Cryptocurrency isn't limited to Bitcoin. There's Ethereum and Litecoin and thousands of others. And in fact, you can make your own Bitcoin, or your own version of Bitcoin, or cryptocurrency. Sorry, I keep using that as a generic term. Thank you, Playlist. You corrected me there. You're absolutely right. There are many forms of cryptocurrency. I actually went with Litecoin because it seems to be the one that a lot of people are kind of looking at and considering. And I think that Bitcoin will probably continue to go up, but I'm wondering if it isn't going to climb a lot slower. And I believe there's more room for growth in other cryptos. And yeah, for that reason, I went with Litecoin. And you can actually make your own cryptocurrency, which I had no idea that was even a thing. But you've got to get people to buy into it, obviously, right? Yeah, and that's the thing. Bitcoin is more widely accepted. What's going to happen in the future? I'm certainly not the one with the answers, but it will be interesting to see. All right, so I think that was, let me just double check and see if that was my whole list or not. Is it? No, it's not. But I do want to point out to everyone before we finish that it takes me a little while to do the timestamps here. So if anyone stumbles across this, you probably didn't make it to this part because this is towards the end. But as soon as I get finished here, as time permits, I'll go through and put timestamps. So if there's anything anyone wants to revisit or wants to jump to a particular topic, I'll put those down in the video description, along with the links to the sources of the information that I include here. I obviously want to make sure that where my sources are disclosed and that they get the credit that they deserve. So if you want to read the full articles about any of the topics that we discuss here, be sure to click through on those. And hopefully we'll have the tech couple on here in the future. And let's leave this open for questions for a couple minutes here, just in case anyone comes in. But that was pretty much everything that I wanted to cover. I want to thank everyone, as usual, for showing up. I love the fact that this live stream is growing. Last Thursday evening, we had a record number, the most people I've had on a live stream. So if anyone hasn't already heard, I also do this at 6 p.m. on Thursday evenings for people who have to work during the day. But every week we're getting more and more participation, so this is really fun. It's the main reason I come here. It's not gonna generate a lot of revenue or anything, but I think that it'll promote my channel. At the same time, gives me an opportunity to kind of talk to everyone out there who's in a similar or same or related field, and we can exchange ideas. So I really prefer this to just making a video and then putting it out there and letting it go, because there's just a lack of interaction. This is way more fun. So Harvey, I'll keep an eye on. You said you did Bitcoin, right? Yeah, I did Litecoin, and I'm gonna try not to check it every 5 minutes, because that's what I'm addicted to, checking stats, and it's probably not a good idea when you invest. Probably should just like wait till the end of the day or the end of the week and see what's going on. But it seems like there's probably, if you believe it's gonna continue to climb, then when it dips, it's probably a good time to buy rather than buying low and selling high. They're saying you should hold it when it's high, but when it dips, you should buy more. So if it keeps going. Did you mention the FCC comments from Barack Obama that are in favor of repealing net neutrality? What a farce. I did not mention that. Thanks for bringing that up. Another thing about this that I should mention, I think it's only fair to say so, and that is that the FCC, apparently this was a 3-2 vote. Okay, so it wasn't just clearly across the board the FCC said, hey, we don't care about Americans. It was one vote. Okay, so it could have gone the other way had one person been on our side. 2 people were, 3 people were against. But, this is the thing about having a very small vote. Oh, thanks, Andrew. It's 11 in the UK. I'm assuming that's evening, right? Let's see. It's a thing about having a small committee. If you have only 5 people voting, it's just crazy. If it's split and there's a decision maker, why do we have such a small number of people deciding any issue? It doesn't make sense today. It made sense when we had horses and buggies and no one could get anywhere and you had to use the Pony Express to communicate. But now it's very easy for us to let our representatives know what we think, and they can go in and vote, and it shouldn't be 5 people deciding on something that affects the entire population. It blows my mind. I think that our form of government is due for not an upgrade, but a restructuring of some sort. I hope that happens during my lifetime. We know that laws and governments move very slowly when it comes to a lot of things. I hope that that's not the case with this, because we're really kind of living in like the 1800s here when it comes to the political system, or at least what we call the democratic system here, which I think we're getting further away from that all the time. What is the oddest way someone said there's a phone crack on their own? Oh, that's a good question. The oddest way someone said their phone cracked on their own. Gosh, I'm going to have to think about... Oh, you know what? I got one. I had a guy who regularly broke his iPhone. This was way back. Okay, this was an iPhone 3GS. He would come in... I know we had a running count on him. He had done 7 screen repairs on the same phone. So he just cracked them over and over and over. And we're like, how... no offense... happy to have your business, but how do you keep breaking your phone so often? Well, this kid was a skater, so he would go to these skating competitions, and when he wasn't at these skateboarding competitions, he would practice, and he was, in the pipe and doing all this kind of crazy stuff. But the craziest way I ever heard was from him. He was skateboarding down the sidewalk, and someone shot at him with the pellet gun. The pellet hit his vest or jacket or whatever he had on hard enough to crack the screen on his phone. So that, to me, being shot by a pellet gun and having your screen get broken as a result, and this is one of those rare moments where, hey, it didn't save his life, but it saved him from getting hit by a pellet in the chest. That's probably the oddest way I think I've heard of someone being or breaking the screen on their phone. Now, one of the most weird situations I want to add to that I've ever heard of, when it comes to phone damage in general, you know, we've all heard about phones going in the toilet and dogs chewing up phones and you name it, you know, I've heard of some really nasty stuff, disgusting stuff I don't want to talk about, but this is the funniest one I've ever heard. I had a customer come in with a BlackBerry. This was a BlackBerry Bold, if you remember those way back in the day. And no one could hear her talk on the other end of the phone. So he said, okay, you know, probably needs a mic replacement. Could be a number of things. Let's check it out. Speakerphone was working, headset was working, but the mic was not working. And she didn't tell us exactly what happened until after the repair. So I cleaned out some debris from the little hole on the bottom where the sound comes in. And I couldn't tell exactly what it was, but I knew that something got pushed pretty far up inside of the phone. And when she came back, I asked her, you know, just curious, do you know, a lot of stuff got up inside of the phone. Do you have any idea what it was? And she looked kind of embarrassed, and her husband was with her, and he started laughing. And she told me that she was in the car. They were at the snow, so they were going to go out and play in the snow or ride a sled or whatever it was. And instead of taking her phone with her, she thought she would do the smart thing and leave it in the car where it wouldn't get lost, it wouldn't get wet, you know, nothing would happen to it. Well, what she forgot apparently, and this is the weirdest thing I think I've ever heard. She forgot that in her cup holder, instead of having an empty cup holder, which is where she usually placed her phone, she had an open jar of peanut butter. So she put her BlackBerry Bold into a jar of peanut butter and then got out of the phone and went and had fun playing in the snow and came back to the car and realized that her BlackBerry was still stuck inside of a jar of peanut butter. So she cleaned it off on the outside and the microphone was plugged with peanut butter. I know I keep saying that, but it's still not real to me. Why do you have an open jar of peanut butter in your cup holder? No idea, but I think that's one of the strangest things, one of the oddest ways I've ever heard of a phone getting damaged. Yes, evening. Okay, hey, thanks for coming by, Andrew. We do this on Thursday at 6 p.m. too, if you weren't here for that comment, so if that's more convenient for you, I don't know what time that'll be where you're at, but be happy to have you on anytime. What's the I said that. I had an iPhone come in with an iPhone 4 with a cracked screen. The customer said her kid had bitten the phone, causing the screen to shatter from near the home button. How old was this kid? That's scary. Yeah, you know what's a weird thing is I suspect, and this is just a theory, but we've had a lot of chewed up phones come in from pets, and it's typically dogs. Cats, for whatever reason, seem to like to chew on cords. So I don't know how many lightning cables I sold because someone's cat chewed up the cord because they love to play with things that look like strings, I assume. But dogs chewing on phones always blew my mind because there's not really anything inside of a phone I don't think that a dog would care about, right? But then I started thinking about it, and this is my theory. I could be way off here. But I tend to think that the reason that people's dogs probably chew on their phones is because you have your phone with you all the time. So your phone has your scent on it, and dogs are very sensitive to smells. So when you're not around and your dog gets bored and he wishes you were there and he finds something that smells like you, they'll typically, you know, drag the blankets around. Sometimes they'll tear things up. They'll chew on stuff. But with the phone, you know, that's like probably one of the most personal things you have outside of your clothing. And I could see where a dog might be frustrated and wish you were there and just start playing with your phone and chewing it up because, hey, that's pretty much a representation of you in some way. That's my theory. I could be way off there, but I think that's what's happening with dogs chewing up phones. But man, if your kid's chewing up a phone hard enough to break the screen, I'm guessing that kid had teeth. That's not a teething thing. That's like there's some teeth in there for the kid to chew on the phone. That would concern me as a parent if my kid was chewing on phones. That's a weird one. That's probably one of the weirdest ones I've heard also. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There are a lot of other bizarre things, but like I said, some of them are just gross. But for the most part, I think the peanut butter and the BlackBerry was probably the funniest one I've ever heard of. And then the guy getting shot with a pellet gun. I mean, come on. Some dogs like to chew on rubber materials too. Yeah. Hey, thanks to you guys for coming by. I certainly appreciate it. I'm going to wrap this up here shortly. Good to see you all as usual. I'll be back on Thursday. You're all welcome to come in and check it out. And I'm going to wait 30 seconds because every time I go to close, another comment comes on because we have this delay going on here. Can you do a live stream while working on phones? You know, John, I can. And actually, when I did a live stream from the MD Wireless store, I was working on a Galaxy S5. I know it's an old phone. I can. The tricky thing is that the way I'm set up in here, I've got to move some things around. Yes is the short answer to that. I like to use the background here because in my house it doesn't look anything like a shop. So for you to have like just my window in the background, there's a couple reasons I don't want to do that. I mean, I can, it's not a big deal, but it kind of affects the lighting. The other thing is that my workbench has the light facing this way instead of towards me, so that would play some funny tricks with the camera, but I'll work it out. Yeah, I do want to do a live stream while working on phones. I think that would be fun. In some ways, I think it might be a little boring. Hopefully not, but it could be boring to anyone who's watching because I like having the functionality of being able to kind of show stuff here and engage with the chat. But yeah, that's definitely in the plans. I want to have multiple cameras so I can just kind of switch back and forth. You know, go to the repair, go here, maybe go to my display so you can see the software that I'm working with and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely. Let me know if you have ideas, you know, specific ideas as to what kind of repairs we would want to do live streaming. The tricky one for me is going to be doing micro soldering stuff because I got this capture card. Actually, I'm going to grab it real quick. Hold on just a second. Oh yeah, let me see if this will work. I have my little away thing here so nobody thinks I just disappeared. Where'd it go? Is it... I thought I did. Nope, I don't. That's weird. I thought I had an away message here. Anyways, give me 1 second. This is how much I've spent hours trying to get this silly microscope hooked up to a computer, because what I'm doing now is I'm using a camera, recording the video into the microscope, and then editing that into my tutorials so everything looks nice and clean. And I wanted to be able to do something live, so I went out and I bought this. It's a game capture card for HDMI inputs, which I have an HDMI input coming out of my camera. The only problem is, for some reason, I think, because I'm running a very old version of Windows, my computer doesn't recognize any devices that I plugged in. So the moment I get that worked out, I'll be able to put the microscope display up on the screen here in a window like this. So that's my ultimate goal. I should have that worked out in the future. That's what I'm working on right now. So hopefully that did more than answer your question. I am going to... Sorry about the table shaking. I'm going to have to fix this too. I'm on a hardwood floor, so every time you walk around in here, everything starts shaking. That's another issue I need to work out. But I think that's it for this week. Thanks again for coming by. I will see you all, if not... Oh, actually not next Monday because of the holiday. So it'll be 2 weeks out, and then it's going to be New Year's Day. So I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to be New Year's Day, which will be the following Monday. I don't want to go 3 weeks without a live stream. I might just reschedule it to a Tuesday or something. I think that would make a lot more sense than just not doing a live stream at all for 2 weeks in a row. But that's the way the holidays lined up this year. So I'll let you know on that, but we'll definitely not have a live stream next Monday, and I won't be available on Tuesday to do one, but possibly the following week. I'll post that on the channel. Thanks for joining. I will see you all next time.